Recap time.
Cool. So we're 8 episodes in. We started, was our first episode August 14th, 18th, something like that, mid-August.
Something like that, yeah.
And yeah, so we're going to do a little recap here and get people up to speed with who we've had on the show so far. Maybe a couple things we've learned as we're figuring out how to do this whole not only podcast but remote podcast. Take it away, Victor.
Well, let's see. August 15th is when we dropped our first episode, and it was just really us just kind of talking about how we met and recapped what's been going on, interests, what we wanted to do with the podcast, which, to be honest, we probably still don't know. We're winging it. So we do know that we like, I think most of the talks have focused around music and branched out from there, which has been really a cool thing to see, right? So we don't necessarily stay or focus solely on music, but we definitely use it to branch into like other discussions. And we've had some really interesting folks on the podcast too. So.
Right. Now that I think about it, our initial podcast was just us talking to each other. Yes. But we're not going to talk to each other for 2 hours this time. We're going to try to keep it short. That's one thing we thought about. Try to keep it relatively concise. We're usually hitting around the 2-hour mark, and which feels good. They've all been interesting, and nothing seems like it drags on. But
and they go by way quicker than I realize. Right, so it doesn't seem like 2 hours. It seems like it's just, we're just BSing for like 30 minutes or 40 minutes. But the next thing you know, it's.
When you go to edit it, you're like, shit, that was way too long.
Yes.
That is one thing we've learned. Like, I've done editing, and that you've done more of the podcast editing than I have, but my obsessive tendencies come through, and I'm like, oh my God. So right now, one thing we've learned is like mute when you're not talking, if you can, to eliminate extraneous noise like grunts and sniffles.
Cars passing by,
and more sniffles and gulpy noises in the throat. And so, yeah, we've tried a variety of platforms, and now going into our second month, October, we're going to be trying Zoom.
Right, capturing some video.
And the video, we've got our snazzy backgrounds here, looking all professional. Definitely feels more professional.
Yeah,
I think the hat makes me feel like a little more professional as well. So
yeah, you look like you're gonna need to go feed some birds out on the lake or on the river or something.
Yeah, I feel like I want to listen to some Paul Simon right now. And
there you go.
And write poetry on the Riviera, but
with a scarf.
Yeah. So our first episode was us yapping, and then second episode was Yuri. So let's do some quick recaps on each episode.
Yeah.
Tell us about Yuri, since he was your colleague.
Yeah. So Yuri came in last minute, mind you. And I've known Yuri for quite a while. And right now he's a cybersecurity expert, very accomplished. He's written 22 technical books. I think he's written another book focusing on mindset and being able to achieve the things that you put your mind to, right? And, our relationship started with a common appreciation for Iron Maiden. So, here's a guy who comes from Brazil, comes to the US from Brazil, and not knowing the language very well, starting off at Microsoft as a contractor, and then working his way over to Dell, where I meet him, learn that he likes Iron Maiden. I like Iron Maiden too. Super smart. And, he talked about, he definitely had a career focus, and what that led to was letting go of his health a little bit. And so when I knew him, he was a little bit heavier, right? Kind of like where I'm creeping up right now with this quarantine. And, but after he left and went, started working at Microsoft again, moved back to Dallas, he just really got in. I guess he just started, he mentioned he started having some health issues. He has 2 young daughters that he wants to be around for. And so he just really started putting the work in, hitting the weights, doing some bodybuilding, competing in some bodybuilding competitions, eventually moving over to some Brazilian jiu-jitsu competitions. So that was a really cool talk that we had. And he talked about like different songs that remind him of coming to the U.S. I think he mentioned Rainmaker from Iron Maiden. He also helped us helps your pronunciation with the Brazilian band there. Not Apa, right? Apa instead of Orapa. I think that's what it was, right?
I was trying to unmute myself. Yeah, I wonder if that shows up. I don't know on the recording. I would hope not, but yes, Hoppa.
Yeah,
I think. But I was calling them Orapa.
Orapa.
So, awesome kind of hip hop metal. What was the Sepultura? Blah blah blah. To the podcast. Yeah, exactly. A totally fascinating episode. Still our shortest episode, most listened to episode, and really, really, really cool, interesting story. Like Yuri was fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's really the direction we were shooting for, is just bringing some folks in, with a common bond being music, or maybe bands. Could be other things in the future as well. So it wouldn't necessarily have to be music. It's, we are very eclectic.
Right. I mean, eclectic in the sense of the music styles that we talk to, the guests that we have.
Yeah.
A lot of them will be musicians and people involved in music. I mean, that's a part of so many people's lives. And obviously myself as a musician and you as a fan of music, I mean, we know a lot of musicians. So of course, and Yuri plays drums. He's not really a professional musician in that sense. Some of our guests are, some aren't, but yeah, like always, that is definitely, I think, going to probably maintain somewhat of a central theme it has on most of these episodes so far, I think.
Yeah.
Moving into the second episode, I muted before that beer belch. Moving into the second episode, we have my buddy Dave on, who I've known for many years, and it was just silly and fun. We talked about silly nicknames. We talked about our demos when we both started playing instruments, how he set up a drum set out of cardboard boxes and a broom for a hi-hat, and I had my first guitar. I mean, it really kind of gives just the story of where my start was, playing guitar and rock and roll and wanting to start a band and all that, and us experiencing that early on, and a ridiculous endeavor recording a demo, or way back in the 90s. And so there was all that stuff, which led into, and then we talked about all kinds of stuff, but that podcast ended up, I think, even if you don't listen to the whole thing, if you want just some tasteless comedy, accidental, not easily offended, and not too attached to Rush. This has become a central theme of our podcast. I don't know why it's not intended, but like Dave Mustaine of Megadeth and Geddy Lee from Rush keep coming up. And that was the first one, I think, where we talked about Rush, although it might have already been discussed in Yuri's podcast, but in a very different way. In a very different way, Geddy Lee was brought up, and Iron Maiden somehow tied to get a short Geddy Lee. And it was just really dumb and really, at least most of the time.
Yes. That's right. I remember how that tied together.
Yeah. So that was just like a lot of fun, kind of a silly getting to know you podcast. But there's a lot of history on that podcast in terms of me and how I started playing guitar and music. Funny enough. So that was our second podcast. Our third podcast was refresh my memory.
That one was Zoe.
Yeah, Zoe. It doesn't seem that long ago. I mean, it hasn't been. It's really only been like a month, but. So Zoe Espinoza is another person that I've known. Well, I met about the same time, a little bit after I met Victor. Victor and I met in Spanish class, and then shortly after that, wasn't in Austin too long. I started teaching and playing around and stuff. So anyway, this music school I was working at, Zoe was back as a teenager, took guitar lessons from me there. And like many of my students over the years, of all come from all different places and ages and this and that, stayed in touch with people, become friends. And so I've known Zoe and Zoe's family for many years now, and a fascinating study just in terms of the various endeavors of this individual, right? I mean, as a blind person, someone who
blind,
initially with a love for heavy metal, wanting to play guitar, was maybe still my only blind student that I've had, actually. And we just had a great relationship, hit it off, did some recording together. Zoe is an author, literally professional lockpicker, works for Apple, shoots guns, plays video games professionally, all of these things without sight. So absolutely super, super fascinating podcast. And I think we kind of joked around a lot on the Dave one. Yuri, maybe not so much politics. And then with Zoe, we started getting into a little bit more of current events and political things, spoke a bit about gender identity and the, all the equality and things of that nature, police brutality, some kind of things like that. So we dug a little deeper in that podcast, but also talked a lot about music. And sure enough, we discussed the long time running rival between Zoe and I of our we used to always give each other shit about my love of Megadeth and Dave Mustaine, and
Zoe's love for
exactly. Not that I don't think Rush is amazing, but it was a fun ride. So that happened again, and where those after that was the next one, Italo, before Jerry, right?
Yes.
Italo,
yeah.
Samaro, history professor, world traveler, loves going to third world countries and ghettos, and just has all kinds of like really interesting stories and insight into various places in the world, whether it be the Ukraine or Brazil. He's from Mexico, Vietnam, Japan, just lots and lots of really cool stories and interesting insight. And then also as someone who's not only a world traveler, but a history professor. So we talked music, which I've known him for many, many years. And we've always talked music, but we also talked a lot more, I think, some politics and current events and things like that show too.
Yeah, he definitely brought a different perspective, right? Being born and raised in Mexico and then being a world traveler, seeing things that, maybe, and Yuri brought this up too, seeing things that maybe we take for granted.
Right.
Here.
It's interesting when someone that's not from the United States comes here and has he's lived here most of his life, I believe, but still a different perspective. And I think traveling outside of the United States, especially when you go to more impoverished countries, right?
Right.
You really gain a different sense of things. Ironically enough, he had been to some places like Ukraine where it was just like, wow, like this is next level stuff. You only think of these kind of things in the United States, but then also going to Tokyo and having a lot of experience in Japan and just saying how interesting and cultural based that country is, and the lack of crime and the absolute zero problems with crime and police brutality and things of that nature in that country based on his observation. So that was really interesting to talk about, quite contrary to some of what we're seeing here, but is what also very prevalent in places that, that he also spoke of, like Brazil and stuff. And I'm sure Yuri would attest on that kind of stuff. So yeah, different perspective, but got a little bit of a different, between Zoe and Italo, we went, it's Italo. It's fun to say when you say it right. We went off in some different directions and obviously talked about serious topics and just all kinds of things. And that's what we're about. Eclectic. Anything goes. Anyone's welcome. We want to talk about a variety of topics in a civil, non-abrasive way. Okay, next one after that was a really fascinating. It was our longest podcast. Enlighten us on that one, Vic.
Yeah, so we had Mr. Jerry Connerly, and I've known Jerry for about almost 4 years now. We've been working together during this whole time, and obviously during this whole time, I've got to know Jerry very well. His story is pretty fascinating, for one, and we didn't get into this, and we definitely all agreed to doing a part 2, but he made a cameo in Mike Judge's Idiocracy film,
Tylenol Jones.
Tylenol Jones, Rehab Officer Tylenol Jones. That's right. So we talked a great deal during that podcast. We had a lot of fun. He brought a lot of insight growing up in Louisiana, Mississippi as a young Black man growing up. The things he's experienced, and then going to college at Mississippi State, joining the Omega Psi Phi fraternity, making some lifelong friends. And then, just working his way through, just to where he's at right now. Really fun, really interesting podcast. A lot of great insight from him.
Fascinating stories in regards to the fraternity and some of the people you across and the athletes and some of the things you experienced hanging in there. And then also we talked about, we ran some parallels, or he ran some parallels between old country music and the origins of hip hop and like old urban Bronx hip hop, which was really interesting. We talked about blues music.
That's right.
The mass exodus and going up the Delta or the Mississippi.
Yep.
So we discussed music in wide variety, but also the things you talked about. And then we did get into Black Lives Matter. We went through a lot of history of U.S. history, and also just the unfairness in the treatment of the Black American over many centuries. So
yeah, absolutely.
There was a lot of interesting information in that podcast, and it was that was a really, really, really fascinating podcast. I know, not surprised that we ran almost 3 hours on that one, but worth listen for sure.
Absolutely. And then after that, we have Mr. Justin James Bridges, who you've known for a little while now.
Yeah, Justin James Bridges is another guy that I met when I first started my band, A Good Rogering, here back in maybe 2009 or so, at a gig in San Marcos, and just had mutual respect. Kind of loosely stayed in touch over the year. We played several shows together back then, and then he moved up to Portland, Oregon. He now lives in Syracuse, New York, and he's been around the country a bit. Was in San Francisco, toured, has done lots of festivals, and was initially, before, kind of started late in his early 20s playing guitar, and got into writing and becoming a musician. He was a coach in various athletics, I think soccer, wrestling, and interpreter for the deaf before becoming a musician turned activist, really, what was it, the Occupy Wall Street and Occupy Portland, some stuff like that. He was very prevalent in when that, like, kind of on the front end of that, and in Portland for all of that stuff going down. And
that and legalization of cannabis.
Was very much on the front end, very much proactive, and in those circles, and as a musician as well, playing these various festivals and stuff, and was the victim of police brutality. He goes into details and tells a story of a very unfortunate event that left him paralyzed, basically left him in a wheelchair for years. And it took a very long time, physical therapy, a long road back to recovery to where he is now today, walking again. And so it was awesome catching up with him, getting that story firsthand, and just learning about all his experiences. And he showed us, well, we don't have video of it, but he showed us his custom guitar and the roster of musicians he's working with on this new, it's not a double album, but there's a 2-part recording that he's doing. 2 different albums, just a bunch of funk, Motown, pop legends, guys that have played with P-Funk, Michael Jackson. I mean, he was listing bands left and right that these guys have just kind of a really all-star cast. It's really interesting to hear what he's got going on. In fact, he's probably up in Michigan recording right now, because I know he was down in Texas, or he will be soon. So we're looking forward to whenever that comes out. So that was number 7. And then our latest one, number 8, was Mike Watson of Dangerous Toys fame. Plays with Dangerous Toys still, and also another band here in Austin called Brutality Brew, BREW, Brutality Incorporated, which I've known singer for that band, Houston, for many years, long before I knew Mike. And just kind of, as everybody knows Dangerous Toys, and had known the band, seen the band, never knew any of those guys or anything, and just oddly enough, kind of through a mutual friend and someone that was into my band, they started dating, came to a show. Mike and I have become friends, and anyway, super cool dude. And he really kind of went into some awesome detail about the story right from the get-go of Dangerous Toys, and just the way that just took off, and one minute they're driving down here from Killeen, looking at, putting up one ads in music stores, and then they're the biggest band in Austin, playing at the Back Room, and then they're recording at Sound City, legendary studio in LA with Max Norman, and just doing, tours and all this kind of stuff. So that was a really interesting story. And then, on that podcast, like I'm sure on a couple more we failed to mention, lo and behold, he had a Dave Mustaine story. Vic chimed in with his Dave Mustaine story. Mike had a Geddy Lee story. And so there's a theme here. If you have any interest in Rush and Megadeth, tune in just for that, because we sure bring them up a lot. And yeah,
unintentionally, yeah.
It always just seems, I don't know what it is. It's just funny how that happens.
Comes out of the woodwork, yeah. But his story was fascinating. I was just really, when he was going into the whole back then, the way the record industry worked, signing a contract, going on a tour, wanting to extend the tour, but the record company wanted them to come back and start recording a new album, which became and I can't recall the second album.
Seekers,
Hellacious. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and the story of the clown and the logo and how all these things kind of came about with that band.
Yeah, definitely safe to say it's not the same today. But it was just really cool listening to him talking about that from back in the heyday, right? So
back in the heyday, and it's interesting because I think he was one of those guys that he had the interesting experience of really hitting it at the tail of that model, of that industry model. And right when the big shift was kind of happening, when you were coming out of the late 80s into the early 90s, when it was just an insanely amazing time for music of all kinds of genres. And there was so much incredibly awesome music in the mainstream. And it was just, that seemed like it was a time for all of us when we were kind of growing up. So that does account for something, but I really feel like there's something about that time in musical history that is sort of aligns with like the late 60s and just a cultural shift based on music, and what a fascinating time. And he was really kind of in the thick of it with that band at the time. And then, and now it's like everyone else in the midst of this pandemic, and going, wait, what? Send you a file.
Yeah.
Well, and back to kind of what we said a little bit ago too. It's like, one reason we wanted to do this was just as a quick recap about the episodes we've done so far.
Right.
And then just, we're learning, this is the first time we've done Zoom. We've done some Skype, but I think we had some mishaps with recording. So I don't feel like we've actually gotten a real legit episode with video yet. We put a few things on YouTube that are just the pictures with the audio, because I don't think we've really captured good video, right?
Right, yeah. Or the platforms we're using, while they're great for podcasts, audio only podcasts, which it's fine. I think we wanted to maybe capture some of the video as well. So we're just trying out different tools, seeing what we can do.
Yeah.
As far as lessons learned, the tooling is one. We've definitely gone through a couple of different tools. The actual uploading to the platform is pretty easy. I mean, like I said, we're using Anchor. You probably hear that ad every now and then when we add it to the beginning of the podcast, but pretty simple platform. I think you used it on this last one, right? You were finally able to get in and use it a little bit.
Yeah, that was the first time I actually went in there and did the whole process from start to finish, and the editing and putting the music on the front and back and uploading the whole thing. And the platform itself is super easy. It took me some time to learn how to do other basic things that everyone else in this generation knows how to do, but I just still go like, hell, how do I download a song from iTunes?
That's right. Yeah.
And so it was really ridiculous, but so there's that. I think we're working pretty well there. It's just we're really exploring our options in terms of the best audio format.
Yeah.
And what's going to sound best and work, have the best workflow, be most consistent, and then also trying to get the video. So now we're trying Zoom. We've done a little Skype. We've done this and that. We're going to try Zoom, and I'm curious to see if you see me muting myself on and off through this recording. I have no idea.
No, it's pretty seamless.
Okay, good. Because, and we look, like I said, I feel more professional already just looking at this background.
What's the hat?
And I'm ready to feed birds. I've already got Julio down by the schoolyard, but I mean, man, just like right there, and then.
Oh yeah.
My biggest thing, I have become obsessed. I'm a musician. I've played many shows where I sing and act a fool on stage, and I don't have a self-conscious about my voice in a live situation usually. I mean, I know
you've got other stuff going on too, man. You've got different instruments. You've got crowd noise.
Right, and I mean, singing was never like I'm a blessed singer. Like I'm not. I mean, it's.
You're no Geddy Lee or Dave Mustaine. Right?
No Geddy Lee. I wish I was. I wish I had a unique, cool voice. It's just kind of my voice is like, I don't know what it is, but it's always means a lot to me when someone actually compliments, because I'm like, really? And some people are definitely not complimentary. But whatever, you know what I mean? It's my voice. And the point being is I've gotten as comfortable as I can with it, I think, as a singer. I know my limitations, and I try and I do this and that. But it's weird because I haven't done a situation where, as a podcast, where you're just talking and you're hearing your talking voice.
Yeah.
And I become obsessed. Like when you first hear your voice on a tape recorder when you're a kid or something, you're like, oh my God, I sound like that, and you sound weird. And I'm sitting there going like, Victor's got this like robust, manly, hello, very white voice going on. I'm over here going, hey everybody, welcome to the podcast. And I'm like, what the? I'm obsessing with my microphone and like change some settings here in my So that's a big thing for me, is getting to a place where I feel like my voice sounds better and sexy. And
now you sound like Batman.
Batman. Yeah. Oh, that was not what I'm going for. So see, we're learning We're learning.
It definitely takes a little bit to get used to listening to your own voice, especially when you're going through scrubbing and doing the editing process. You're like, oh, I can do.
Well, it's really funny too. I mean, I've done this a lot with audio, and it's funny. Like it's one of those things you do where you put something on a loop and you're just trying out some, you're messing with EQs and compressions, and you're just hearing yourself going, and then, and you're just saying that just the same, stupid thing over and over, and going like, wow, this is bad.
Yeah.
But overall, I mean, it's been pretty awesome, and really
it's been
fun, man. Yeah. Like that was, I think, our intent more than anything. I mean, of course, if people want to donate money and, listen to our shows, we make like a third of a cent for every play or something, amazing.
That's
and
right.
Sponsors gain us, but I think we probably earned a good $1 or so at this point. So we're well on our way to being, tillionaires. But yeah, I mean, beyond anything monetary, like just talking to different people has been really cool. And especially during this time when everyone's been so separated, there's so much pent up this and that, and there's a lot of like negative energy and a lot of like people pinned against each other, and division is just absolutely awful.
Yeah.
And there's so many people we could point the finger at and blame for that. I am guilty, like all of us, for just not holding my tongue and being, it's a bad time in a lot of ways. And I think what's been so amazing and what's the best part about this is just talking to people. Some people might have talked to last week. Some people I haven't talked to in years. Some people I've never talked to, or Vic, and you talk to that person one-on-one, you learn about them, you discuss things, you find things you have in common. And it's beautiful. That's what life should be all about, meeting people as individuals and communicating and learning and sharing ideas and accepting ideas and learning, together to be tolerant and all these things. So I think if anything, that would be the mission of this podcast. So we invite you to join us on our journey. We've got 8 episodes under our belt. If you're ever bored, throw them on, check them out. You're going to hear about Dave Mustaine and Geddy Lee at the very least. And we got several more booked. We're already booked all the way into January. So, and then yes.
We also talked about releasing twice a week now, right?
Right. We've been doing once a week, and I think we're going to start doing Saturdays and Wednesdays because we got such an initial booking. We have so many people. Primarily my fault for reaching out to a lot of people and going, oh, sorry, Victor, I think I booked like 500 people already. But it's cool, and we're having a blast doing it. So
it's definitely been a welcome distraction for folks, I think.
Yeah. And it's, it is. It's like a relaxation for me, actually. Like, even though there's still work involved in the post of it and everything, like this is like, for me, I feel like this is my zen. You know what I mean? Like if I'm turning the TV on, well, shit, man, I'm not getting anything healthy there. My God, I watched the debate last night and it's just a catastrophe. It's just horrible. And so, I say last night, this will air a few days from now, but like, it really is just like really like relaxing and fun and enjoyable. And it feels like this is like what I enjoy my downtime lately, being this podcast. So.
Yeah. Well, anything you turn on nowadays is, it's just in your face, right? It's either the election or it's current events. You can't even watch sports anymore, right? You remember that time that Ray Rice got busted for beating up his girlfriend in the elevator, and then the NFL was airing like, no more beating up your girlfriend, no more falling down the stairs. And Bill Burr had a little great rant about that on one of the late night talk shows, where he's like, why are you lecturing me? You're the guys that are beating up women. I just want to watch football. So, so hopefully this serves as a welcome distraction with the, you know, lighthearted attempt to jab at some things.
And I will, yeah. And, you know, I'm not here to push a political agenda on anybody, but I think certainly, definitely not my MO. My thing I usually try to do is to sort of like, and I do it in a satirical way, and I can poke and I share mean memes and I say snarky things, and I'm guilty of trolling a little here and there. It's not my intent to be a jerk. I mean, that's kind of a waste of time. Like, I do enjoy satire and funny, snarky stuff here and there done, you know, correctly. But, you know, the main thing for me comes down to just like look in the mirror, you know what I mean? Before you just, you go on a crusade and rant and tear into someone else and just tell them what an absolute bastard they are. Like, you know, like double check yourself for a minute. And I think none of us are perfect. We're all flawed. We're all conditioned. We're all indoctrinated. And it's really important for us to keep that in mind and realize that we don't all come from the same place, share the same values. There are universal negatives and bad behavior and horrible things that we, as a civilized, you know, ideally civilized species, that wouldn't that be nice, and civilized society, wouldn't that be nice if we all agreed on? But we don't. Unfortunately, it's really unfortunate, and there's always going to be really terrible people. There's always going to be monsters and murderers and rapists and racists, and fuck those people. You know what I mean? The rest of us are pretty decent fucking people. So let's stop being divisive and throwing shit at each other, and let's unify, man. Like, you know what I mean? And I think something like this, let's talk to each other. Let's get to know each other. Don't assume things. Don't hate someone based on one stupid little Facebook post they made when they were in a bad mood, or a slew of memes that you don't agree with. It doesn't mean they're a bad person. Okay. So I think that's the big thing. I hate seeing myself or anyone else losing friends in this time over all of this horrible stuff, because I really have lots of friends, and sometimes it's easy to forget. I'm very lucky. I have lots of friends and people that I respect and love that have come from all kinds of different backgrounds and have all kinds of different political views and like all kinds of different music, et cetera, et cetera. Eclectic Soundtrax, hence the title. So I think if I ever had a message, that would be the message. I'm certainly not going to preach to anybody how to think or how to vote or what religion to be or any of that bullshit. You know, I think that first and foremost, just treat people with respect and dignity, you know. Anyway, so there's that. We've probably already gone over time, so we should probably sign off, get this little jewel out there, and hopefully some people will listen, get a little backstory on what we're doing, what we've done so far. And
so I think highlights is you know, we recapped our guests. We're going to twice a week. You know, we talked about maybe doing a part 1 and part 2, breaking up the episodes a little bit. So we'll think about that. We'll check that out. I know we've gotten some feedback from some folks about that. Coming up,
feedback too. Yeah, when we post this, anyone that has feedback on how we can make this better, longer, shorter, split them up, whatever, what days, or any kind of feedback is definitely appreciated.
Not enough Geddy Lee, not enough Dave Mustaine stories, things like that. Yeah. Okay, so I guess after this, what do we have coming up? I'm excited because we have a mutual friend that we're going to be having on the podcast. He is he's a musician. He is an actor, a street pizza connoisseur, and then
Burning Man connoisseur.
So this will be a fun one. I you know, people probably know him by his moniker number 3, but we'll be talking to PJ.
PJ's Paul Evans, and then Chris DeVore, a local musician here in Austin, Texas, that I've known for many years. Actually, who was in a band with me, which we discussed on the second podcast, Pitchfork, which was my first band when I moved here to Austin, which was quite a fiasco. And so Chris and I will be sharing some stories from that. And he goes by a title that I can't even think off the top of my head. It's like the karate. It's a long one. Karate and wizard and guitar extraordinaire. It's a lot.
Oh wow. Okay.
That alone should spark your interest. Fantastic musician, good guy. We've got a lot. We got a lot of people coming up. So
we got a lot of people. Yeah.
Just stay tuned. Oh, check out our Facebook page. Like us on Facebook, and that way we'll let you know. You know, you'll see all of every time we post a new website, you'll see what's up and who's on it. And we're also on Instagram for all the models out there that are on Instagram every day.
That's right. That want
to watch two guys like us talk to other guys that look like us.
That's right. The podcast should be available on a lot of different platforms. Spotify, of course, the Anchor website, but then iTunes, Overcast. It's like 8 total. I can't remember them all off the top of my head, but it's out there.
Yeah, it's all over the place. Anchor's the hub. If you just go to Eclectic Soundtrax or Anchor/Eclectic Soundtrax, it's got everything there. But then you can find us obviously on Spotify and Apple Music. Those are probably the biggest ones.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Who knows?
Who knows?
It's
if you listen to podcasts, I'm sure you'll find it. Yeah. Cool. We're excited.
Yeah.
Yay.
All right.
Can you feel our energy? It is kind of late. Okay.
Cool. No worries. All right. Well, I will. I guess we'll talk again here coming up with PJ, asking him how the street pizza compares between Austin, Los Angeles, North Carolina.
I can't wait. All right, everybody. Until next time.
Bam.
Eclectic Soundtrax signing out.